I've reviewed plenty of minimalist watches before, but this has to be the most minimalist so far, if that makes any sense. This brand Linjer started making leather goods a few years ago and has since moved into the watch space. Obviously, that puts them in my realm. I asked them if I could take a look at their watches a while back and they said yes and shipped me a couple of their watches. As you know, my channel, that in no way guarantees a positive review. Either way, the first of those watches is this, the Classic. And I'll be looking at this today to see if it's a good watch or not. If you go on to enjoy this video, then please consider subscribing to see more watch videos in the future. Okay, so this watch has some striking styling choices that you'll notice straight away. First things first is the complete lack of branding. A few of Linjer's models go down this route with no visible logo on the dial or even on the buckle. In fact, the only time that this brand is really mentioned is on the rear of the case. This may be appealing to those of you who don't like lots of branding stamped all over the watches. A couple of watch brands go down that route with massive logos, inscriptions in the side of the watches. This one's kind of the antithesis of that. This uncluttered look is compounded by the lack of regular second markers, which are instead replaced by tiny debossed circles. This gives the dial the ultimate clean finish, and when paired with the lacquered dial, you really get that super smooth look. This Classic model features a raised chapter ring around the perimeter, which is not too dissimilar from that found on the Nordgreen watch I looked at a couple of weeks back. I think the stainless steel case goes really well with the dial and indices. This particular variant coming in a brushed gunmetal finish with a single glossed ring near the top of the watch. I generally like these brushed finishes on watches because I tend to think, especially at this price point, that they look higher quality than their chromed counterparts. And not to mention, I think they're just a bit more versatile. They look a fraction more casual, meaning that you can wear them with a bunch of stuff, though I think this would still be perfectly suitable with more formal wear. A side factor is also that you really don't have to worry about fingerprints with these. For most watches out there with the high shine finishes, you can just see a fingerprint stamped all over them, so I find this to be quite useful. The crown is really small and protrudes in the normal 3 o'clock position. This one doesn't feature the regular horizontal notches, but instead features a deep vertical groove. And the crown does function better than you'd expect considering the lack of grip in this area. Though with wet or sweaty hands, I think you may struggle to adjust the time. That being said though, with these quartz watches, I'm trying to ease down on my criticism to do with crowns, because in reality, once you've set them once, it's going to be ages before you need to set them again. This will be much more of an issue with a mechanical watch. With this one, not so much. Size-wise, this watch comes in at 38mm in diameter with a 44mm lug-to-lug size. Those lugs do protrude a little bit more than I'd probably like. Though the watch sits quite well on my 6¼ inch wrist, especially when combined with the sub 9mm depth, I do think it wears a fraction larger than the 38mm size would suggest. Nevertheless, it's nice that they've got this option in addition to the 41mm version. That one would obviously be the optimal choice if you've got, average to larger sized wrists. But it's good that there are multiple options. I just prefer it if these lugs are a little bit tighter to the case. Aesthetically, I do think it's an attractive looking watch. This minimalist style, as you probably know, is all the rage at the moment. This one in particular looks very simple and minimal, meaning it should wear well casually and dressed up, though I can see how some people may think that this looks a little bit boring. There really isn't, that much going on there. Housed within the watch is a Swiss Ronda 5 series quartz movement. This is a fairly solid movement, and to be honest, it's nice to see one of these rather than the overused Miyota quartz options that are fitted in seemingly every fashion watch right now. Obviously, like with lots of quartz movements, these are going to be really accurate. And what I will say is that this particular one at least has hit the second markers relatively consistently, especially when compared to some of the recent Miyota watches that I've looked at before, which have tended to fit perfectly between the second markers. That being said though, if you're a fan of a mechanical watch, then this particular one obviously isn't going to be for you. They do make a mechanical watch, which I'll be looking at in a future video. The watch is covered by lightly domed sapphire crystal with an anti-reflective coating on the top too. That anti-reflective coating really does a good job as well. You can have this in direct lights like I've got in here and you're still easily able to read the time. And from tight angles, you really get some of that distortion as well of the dial due to the domed glass. And that glass not only looks good from the side, but it also provides great scratch protection. You should have no worries about scratching this at work or wherever really. This is what I want to see at a watch at this price point, so I'm glad that it's there. Despite the 6 screws holding the rear in place, the watch disappointingly only has 30 meters of water resistance. If you're not familiar with watches and how these resistance ratings work, you might think that this is a lot, but in fact 30 meters of resistance is really only making this watch splash proof. I'd avoid washing the dishes with this or definitely swimming in it. Nevertheless, it's more of a dress watch anyway, so I probably wouldn't think that any of you would be doing that, though obviously more would be optimal. Now, given this brand is first and foremost a leather company, it's fair to say I had high expectations for the strap. Fortunately, I am far from disappointed in this regard. The strap is made of full-grain vegetable tanned leather and is fantastic quality. It's supple and it feels that it'll just last extremely well over time. It's pleasing that this brand hasn't cheapened out in this regard, which loads of brands do, even some of the big brands. The strap is aided further by the addition of the quick-release tabs. These are pretty common nowadays and they allow you to quickly change between straps should you need to. The only thing that concerns me with this strap on reflection is the colour. It's slightly more orange than you'd think and it probably doesn't quite come across accurately on camera. As a result, I found this a little bit tricky to match with certain outfits and leather items that I've got, which are often a slightly darker tone than this. If I could choose again, I'd probably go back and choose a slightly darker version. Nevertheless, I guess that is on me. The brand says that they have a Norwegian design studio based in Hong Kong. I'm not sure exactly how that makes sense, but I'm gathering that the watches are made in Hong Kong, which to be honest, that's exactly what I'd expect for a brand like this. It's not inherently negative, but I guess it's just something to be aware of. The build quality overall, regardless of where it's made, actually feels solid, and the piece overall has a good weight to it, slightly better than I probably expected before receiving it. Many slim watches these days, especially these super slim ones, they can feel really brittle, almost like you'll snap them with your fingers. You certainly don't get that feeling with this watch, so I think whichever factory these are made in, they've done quite a good job. How much are they asking for one of these then? Well, the list price on their website is about £190, though I must say it's been a long time since I've seen it at that price point. And that's not just because of Black Friday, this thing seems to have been on offer for quite a while at the £160 mark. At £190, I'd say that would be overpriced, whereas at £160, I think that's pretty fair for what you're getting. You'll probably be able to find a discount code and use that on the top, which should take it down a bit further. And for the specifications and the overall build quality, I'd say that you'd be getting a fairly good deal. Especially when you're looking in the realm of these, Instagram-y fashion watches that primarily look good, then you could do a hell of a lot worse, definitely. As a whole, this watch is fairly solid. It's not my favourite, but if you're someone that was looking at other brands like DW, then I'd certainly say that this is a better option. Given some of the visible similarities, a couple of you asked how this brand compared to the Nord Green watch that I covered in a recent video. And personally, I do quite like both watches, but if it was my money to spend, I'd probably go with the Linjer, primarily just because it feels better build quality when you got them both in the hand. You've got the addition of the sapphire glass, the strap is slightly better too, and it does cost a little bit more. Is it the absolute best value in watches at this price point? Probably not, but for a small brand like this, I think they've done quite a good job.